The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Grace.
Of course, you are back with us on our second segment of today, where we will have a guest for our Durian Heat to discuss on critical issue. And today we are going to talk about the ASEAN economic community. Can it open doors to the private sector? Of course, talking about the private sector, who else that we should talk to other than the ASEAN Business Advisory Council? One of the council member, Tan Sri Munir Majid. He is in the studio right now. Hi.
Hi, good morning.
Morning. So, first of all, perhaps a bit of sharing of your background and the ASEAN Business Advisory Council?
Well, the ASEAN Business Advisory Council set up in 2003 by the ASEAN leaders to be the official representative of the private sector in interaction with ASEAN officialdom, if you like. Okay. And so it has three members from each ASEAN country. Therefore, it's a council of 30 members. And one of the three members from each of the ASEAN countries has to be from the small and medium enterprise sector, to take care of the kind of interests of these companies. And therefore, it meets, quite regularly. But the most important thing is it also meets the ASEAN economic ministers and also the ASEAN leaders. In the past, it meets the ASEAN leaders once a year in the November summit, and the economic ministers maybe once or twice a year. It does a lot of work on SMEs, about women, entrepreneurs, and also it does work on young entrepreneurs. It also looks at the priority integration sectors of ASEAN, 12 of those sectors that have been identified, and it makes progress reports, to the leaders. I mean, I only got involved. I was, insofar as ASEAN is concerned, my interest primarily was intellectual and academic.
Oh, I didn't know about it.
So I started the Southeast Asia program at the London School of Economics.
So economics has always been your interest.
Yeah,
but
I
on the
also look at
academic
the
side.
geopolitics of it. The geopolitical environment. Geopolitical environment is crucial, for anything to happen, within that context. And I've written quite a lot from the LSE Ideas, which is a Center for International Affairs, Diplomacy and Strategy, on Southeast Asia. So I've been doing this, and even before that, when I was in New Straits Times and all that, I've been doing Southeast Asian things for the longest time.
So you have always been focusing on Southeast Asia, even prior to the whole idea of ASEAN community or even ASEAN itself.
Well, I wouldn't say so. ASEAN was set up in 1967. Therefore,
not old enough.
Some of you were not born then yet. I was, and obviously, I mean, the setting up of ASEAN was such an important event for those of us who lived here, particularly because it took place after confrontasi with Indonesia, which really only ended in 1965 or 66, when Suharto came to power and Sukarno was sort of had to step down, So it's almost all my adult life, has been involved in thinking about Southeast Asia, where we live, and what have you. Now, coming back to ASEAN Business Advisory Council, I was invited by the government here to become the chair of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council Malaysia, and that was only in February last year, actually. And then, of course, this year I'm the chair of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council because Malaysia is the chair of ASEAN. So while I have all that background, what's new to me is the way this council operates, the kind of people there are in this council. Some of which, sort of not to my liking in terms of the speed with which we do things and what we do, how strongly we make our presentations, to the leaders, how effective we are. And we must, we're upping our game very much. And so in the last 2-3 years, there's been, a lot of activity by ASEAN Bank to make its impact, more forceful and more evident. At the same time, also, I'm president of the ASEAN Business Club, which is sometimes deemed to be the elitist group. So on the one hand, I have this non-elitist group, and then on the other, I'm.
And how do you find
driving.
the balance?
No, I'm ensuring there's a link between them. There has been suspicions and, the usual kind of bitchiness that takes place about, these things, unnecessary, some of them. But I'm thankfully I'm able to wind them together and bind them.
What is the disconnection between like the non-elitist business groups and the business group that are mainly formed by SMEs and all that?
No, the disconnection really is the fact that first there was a feeling by ASEAN Business Advisory Council that ASEAN Business Club did not recognize them, does not recognize their position, their official position, and they're making their own, presentations, meeting the leaders on their own and stuff like that. And
was there any communication problem between the non-elite and the elite business groups?
I guess what she meant is, do they even communicate with each other?
Yeah.
No, the point was, they didn't quite communicate, they didn't quite communicate. At the same time, when I got into ASEAN Bank, I said, you can't stop anyone from seeing the leaders, from making presentations,
I mean, it's the private sector.
Yeah, and people do these things.
Yeah, privately.
They will lobby. They will do whatever they need. So let's not be, sort of stick in the mud about this.
Right.
But we are the official representatives. Never mind. So let's put together whatever views others have. But to be fair to ASEAN Bank, also, it has also set up something called the Joint Business Council, where it invites other councils outside ASEAN Bank, usually the ASEAN Plus councils, US ASEAN Business Council, the China ASEAN Business Council, and it has a joint meeting with them to get their views so that ASEAN Bank can make presentations that include their views as well. What I have done is not only do I want to have these joint council meetings, I want to have one-on-one with this council member. So now the ASEAN Business Club is also invited. Of course, I cannot represent ASEAN Business Club. The Chief Operating Officer of CHARI, of which I'm chairman, CIMB ASEAN Research Institute, represents ABC, and ABC does some useful work, very useful work. They've been having the ABC forum since 2013, every year in Singapore, where they look at the various sectors in ASEAN. They've looked at 13, actually, in the last 2 years. And they are able to come up with the actual business experience as opposed to the official proclamation of we've done this, we've done that, and this has been signed, this has been achieved, and say, oh no, this has not happened.
So this is more like a frank discussion rather than all the ceremonial and rhetorical language. But let's move forward to AEC, because the ASEAN Economic Community is still very much something that people are figuring out, especially the private sector, like how they can benefit from it. And I think ASEAN Business Advisory Council has done a lot of justice to explain, to share information, or to connect governments with the private sector. And why do you think, personally, ASEAN Economic Community will be significant for the private sector? Prior to it, the private sector probably would be, dealing things by themselves, figuring out whatever. Let's say if they want to do business in Vietnam, they have to do their own research and based on their own connection there. But with ASEAN Economic Community, how easy it is for the private sector?
Well, the ASEAN Economic Community has got 4 broad objectives. Okay, the first objective is to establish a single market and production base. Okay, the second objective is to have a free movement of goods, services, and skilled people. The third objective is to have a competitive region, a region which is highly competitive. And the fourth objective is to have a region which is open to the world. There's been lots of debates, if you have a community, a close community, a regional community, do you turn your back, on the world? It's not true. It depends how you conduct yourself, and what your objectives are. If you're open to the world, and the ASEAN Economic Community is clearly open to the world because it wants trade and it wants investment. And indeed, the ASEAN Economic Community would encourage trade with outside ASEAN countries as well, and would encourage investment coming into ASEAN countries. And as of last year, the total amount of investment that's come into ASEAN countries because of the potential of the ASEAN Economic Community, one or other of these four broad objectives, because of that potential, have been coming in and has exceeded the total amount of investment that goes into China. You will remember only about 5, 6, 7 years ago, the fear was that all the investments are not coming, this way to Southeast Asia, and they're going to go to China.
But that's not the reality right now.
No, now more are coming into Southeast Asia. Is it not of benefit for business, for people, for employment, for skills, So it is obviously, a very useful device. At the same time, when you so there is investment that's coming in. And then trade within ASEAN also is supposed to be encouraged, free movement of trade, not as much as one would like to see, because there's more trade extra-ASEAN than there is intra-ASEAN among ASEAN countries.
That's a huge question mark, even for myself. Why only now, people are starting to discover that why we are not doing business with each other? Why in the past we are mainly doing business with countries outside of Southeast Asia?
Well, because most countries of ASEAN are very strong on international trade. Malaysia, for example, the size of our trade, is about 1.5 times the size of our GDP. Okay, right? Singapore is about 2 over times. I can't remember how many times. So which means they've been looking out. Outwards. That's one reason why they've always looked outwards, and of course, we tended to look outwards because we did not develop this intra links in business. The links were taking place in terms of politics, in terms of security, but in terms of economics and business, it was not that strong. However, having said that, there were some countries in ASEAN which are even ahead of the ASEAN Economic Community. They were making investments in other ASEAN countries quite independent of the community. You take companies like those companies in Singapore. I mean, they've been outward looking. They've had to be outward looking, and they've been investing all over the place in ASEAN. Not because of the ASEAN community, but because they needed a larger market than Singapore. And there's some Malaysian companies which have also been riding on the ASEAN Economic Community prospects, and taking advantage of these things. I mean, primarily, the financial companies like Maybank and like CIMB, but also, of course, so the aviation companies, like AirAsia, and so. The community gives opportunity for you to expand your market size improved. It gives you the opportunity to realize economies of scale. Once you have established a certain cost, the certain cost center, you can actually spread the cost out over larger operations. And therefore, some of the frustrations in business is when they cannot effectively spread the economies of scale. For example, they can't employ people who are already trained in another country. For example, they cannot, let's say, give out information of a company that they have in Malaysia to when they're operating in Indonesia. You've got to build up a whole new database when you already have it in one country. So they want these economies of scale, to be allowed to happen, so that then their businesses will prosper, and then they are able to offer their services at a cheaper cost. Greater variety, more choice for consumers. So these kinds of benefits will come, and of course I'd like to state a caveat to your question. However, a community does not just happen, just like that. And there's no magic wand, say, in the end of 2015, Now you have, the ASEAN Economic Community. Communities take a long time to be built.
Right.
Even national communities, ours, for example, we have lots of stresses and strains, which are based on economic differences, racial differences, religious differences, and this is the bread and butter of life in the building of an economy.
And that's why you have the ASEAN post 2015 development agenda, where you want to somehow push forward the community in different areas. And one of it, I think, is about building infrastructure, strengthening the business engagement in different countries. But we will take a short break. When we return, we will discuss more on this area regarding on the ASEAN economic community.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Welcome back. This is Grace.
And of course, you are listening to us with Tan Sri Munir Majid, Chairman of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, talking about the AEC. Can it open doors to the private sector? So, AEC. Do you think AEC cater equal prospects towards ASEAN companies and SMEs as compared to, the usual MNC and foreign companies? Since, the question of intra-trade, you want to increase it.
Well, it's an open and free market, okay? And it is equally open to the MNCs and the non-ASEAN companies as well, and many of them are indeed moving very fast to take advantage of the ASEAN Economic Community. There was a survey done at the end of last year by the Economist Intelligence Unit of about 171 multinationals, a quarter of which were ASEAN, but the rest were actually foreign, non-ASEAN. They are making massive plans, to have sales and marketing representatives in a number of countries where they see they can expand, their sales and get, a bigger market. At the same time, most importantly, they are making big plans to make investments in manufacturing, particularly in Myanmar and Indonesia, which is very important. And if you extrapolate those coming decisions, it is not unlikely that Indonesia and Myanmar will overtake Malaysia,
and Singapore,
Thailand, and the Philippines as manufacturing centers, and which means, of course, Malaysia itself has to restructure and go into higher level, activities.
So that means
different.
So that means the future of Malaysia shouldn't be manufacturing just normal products and goods and services, but more towards going to the heavy industry manufacturing.
Not necessarily heavy industry, but we might be going rather more into services, service industries. Like of course finance, banking.
So following the path of Singapore, making it into a financial hub.
Yeah, everyone's going up the ladder, so to speak. And so, particularly I mentioned Myanmar and Indonesia because these two countries are rather worried about the impact of the AEC on them and their economies. However, the benefits that will come if they become efficient, if there was an AEC that worked efficiently. You take Toyota, okay? Toyota makes motor cars in Thailand. Now, where does it get its parts for those motor cars from? It gets them from Malaysia, it gets from the Philippines, and these parts are able to move seamlessly with no tariffs, okay? And supply the manufacturing plant in Thailand to make Toyota, and Thailand is the largest automobile center in ASEAN. However, another company, motor car company, is moving out of Thailand, okay, to Vietnam. Okay, why? Because it says the logistics are better in Vietnam. So there's going to be this kind of competition. People will make decisions.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing. And you can't keep protecting companies, And even Indonesian companies want to expand outside of Indonesia into ASEAN. You take Lipo. Lipo, it has just recently, about a month ago, announced...
It is an Indonesian brand,
yeah, it's an
right?
Indonesian group run by the Riyadis, James Riyadi, John Riyadi. And they expanding on the retail side. So they're making investments into technology, in retail, 500 million. They're looking for sales of about 2 billion, about quarter to half of which will come from e-commerce, i.e., sales from business to consumer, B2C. And of course, e-commerce transcends boundaries. You can make sales, maybe you buy things in, let's say, in British shirts in Paris or whatever, and you make the sales, you pay, by credit card, and then delivery comes, within 2 days, 3 days, whatever they say will be the time taken. So this will expand, consumer choice and give the companies, say, in Britain, the opportunity to expand their business. If I was going to buy this kind of shirt, say from Solo, batik, which I happen to like Indonesian batik very much indeed, am I sure that the shirt will come? Am I sure that my credit card will be accepted? So there are two issues that arise here. One is e-payments, to facilitate such movement, and two is a matter of logistics, whether things will be physically carried.
But you are right. You are spot on the e-commerce part, because even for women, Zalora seems to be the choice for women to go shopping rather than physically going to the shopping mall and buy clothing.
Yeah.
So it shows that more and more people are opting for going to as consumer. Purchasing stuff online, going directly to the suppliers, perhaps.
Yeah, you're so right. But although it still is low compared to the developed countries, in ASEAN as a whole, internet sales as a percentage of total sales is only 1%. In Europe, America is about 8-9%. And so there's 8 to 9 times growth prospect for ASEAN if we got our act together. And this will benefit who? Benefit the consumers, benefit the retailers, but benefit the logistics companies, and certainly benefit the producers of those goods, like my example of the Solo batik
supplier.
And openness also results in greater income. My favorite story is of this seaweed producer in Kota Kinabalu, and she sells seaweed. She made 450 ringgit per month selling seaweed in Kota Kinabalu and Sabah. Then she was developed a website with the help of TM, and then she was able to reach out. So her business to consumer sales increased because she reached out, and she's got now consumers in Japan and China, and she's actually making 20,000 ringgit a month. You can see how the leverage of technology and the openness of markets, how these things allow you to grow and expand to your benefit.
Let's go back to reality. Let's say...
Are you saying I wasn't talking reality when talking about these things?
Reality in Malaysia right now, because the reality is, you can have a really dedicated entrepreneurs like the seaweed seller, but what about the normal... let's say the makcik that produced keropok leko, how can she benefit from it when first of all, she doesn't speak English, she doesn't have access to information, maybe internet access is pretty weak as well. Like there's just so many, I would say, barriers to how she can expand her business, even though she might be making the best keropok leko in her town itself.
Well, the example of the seaweed seller illustrates what can happen. I don't imagine the seaweed seller speaks Chinese, Mandarin or Japanese, or indeed English, But you know what you need to do as a business person. So you have a website, and it's usually in English, and you get someone to help you, maybe your son or whatever, to do it. I do take your point, however, that many of them do not have this kind of capabilities, and therefore it needs to be developed. In reports that the ASEAN Business Advisory Council has been making, particularly in 2013, 2014, and in our report that we're making to the leaders when they come to meet this month, we're saying the SMEs, these MSMEs, we say micro, small, and medium enterprises, need to be addressed. Their needs need to be addressed. Essentially, they have three primary needs. One, access to finance. They have a problem. You got go see the Arlene and so on. You're dead in the water. They charge you an arm and a leg, and you're out of business before you know it. And 2, they need to use technology, like I gave you the example just now, more. And 3, they have to practice modern management methods, more modern management methods. Some of them don't keep books, don't keep accounts. How do you apply for a bank loan if you don't keep books and you don't keep accounts? Therefore, we say, ASEAN Bank, saying, the leaders should say banks operating in their countries, and in particular banks from other countries in ASEAN who are in the host country, should be made compulsory for them to set aside a portion of their assets or their loans to MSMEs. 1. Second, they should mentor the MSMEs in terms of bookkeeping and how to apply for loans, and also in how to use technology. And so this comes to the second point. You get loans to use technology rather than buy a Mercedes car, for the big boss or whatever. So you use technology and how you can leverage and how you can reach out to get more. And then you begin to improve your management methods. So you can have a policy, an ASEAN policy, making it compulsory for banks to help the SMEs to come up to speed. But SMEs have to understand they cannot be relying on help all the time, however. They have to get more competitive. Use the help, they have to become better, more efficient.
Just to provide the avenue for them.
Yeah. You merge with others, or or whatever you need to do to become more efficient and more competitive.
But the banking sectors in Southeast Asia, are they open enough to accommodate small businesses?
Well, it is,
And also young entrepreneurs in this sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fact. I mean, if I was operating in Indonesia, if 97% of the enterprises in Indonesia are MSMEs, inevitably I'll be making loans to MSMEs as well.
But is this happening?
Yeah. I mean, you have to, because that's how...
But how will people be able to get the information, the correct information? Let's say you provide all those schemes and all, but then how will people all this looking forward to expand their business?
I guess a hub for information.
Yeah. And a portal is I think is part of the plan by the ASEAN SME group to do so. And I do know also that the US ASEAN Business Council is also developing a site, information base, so things are happening, but are they happening sufficiently?
Right.
Are they happening fast enough? Or are they going to be late, and these SMEs are going to go under, before they access, these opportunities, So these are questions that the leaders must also think about, because they employ SMEs, anything between 57 to 90+% of the working population. If a lot of people are thrown out of work, you're going to have trouble. You're going to have social and political problems. There might be a pushback to all these AEC steps that are being taken.
So economy and politics are interlinked somehow, or intertwined. Talking about social unrest, although I'm not going to go to that particular area, but I do want to talk about people who make up the workers of SMEs or MNC, because in an environment where you have free movement of people, why only specified skilled workers rather than workers in general?
Well, I would have thought, it is self-evident, because there is the fear there's going to be a deluge of people moving across borders, unskilled people, and with no national protection against such huge numbers of people coming in and overwhelming, other countries. And there will be this kind of movements if it was allowed. I mean, you can see even in Europe. There are problems, in the UK about people coming from Eastern Europe and so on,
taking
working.
The jobs of the
not just taking jobs, but also, sort of living off the welfare, welfare scheme that exists in the UK. And so hence one of the reasons for the diminution of support for the European Union in the UK is because of these factors, and at the same time in our case, I mean, we're even lower down the economic scale, economic ladder, and it can cause a lot of problems. And what's more important, however, is to ensure that where there is organized movement of unskilled labor, like Malaysia relies so much on Indonesian unskilled labor, that ASEAN works. And there's also the same thing that happens with Thailand and Myanmar, in terms of, and some people from Cambodia also come into Thailand, but there's not large numbers. Thailand and Myanmar, Malaysia and Indonesia, for them to work on a protection of migrant labor, have a code of the rights and obligations of migrant labor, so that the kind of animosity that happens in Indonesia feels that the maids are treated badly, and so on, don't happen when you have such standards. In the UK, it's very clear. In Europe, it's very clear what the standards are. They must be given days off, and etc., etc. There's a minimum wage, and so on. We can, look at this template and see what we can do.
So the standards, to improve the standards of protection of workers, regardless is skill or unskilled, is it part of the ASEAN Economic Community agenda?
That's what we are at ASEAN Back in the report that we were giving to the leaders at the end of this month, 26th of April. We have said we have identified 10 particular proposals for the post-2015 ASEAN, one of which relates to labor issues, workers' rights, and so on. Workers' rights, women's rights, children's rights at work. Have not been addressed. We have to come up, lift the standards. So we have indicated to the leaders in April, these are the things we'd like them to look at, and we've identified them. And then we say in November we're going to go into detail about one. But most of the concentration of our report for April is on what needs to be done to make ASEAN more or less real to people.
Right. Yeah.
So I got something. We have proposals, about 7 that we've made, which I call the HIP proposals. High impact proposals. And then we've got like 8 proposals, which are what I call the TAN proposals, which means take action now proposals that can take place before November, so that you can have when it happens. Although I say it's not a magic wand, it's not going to, but you must make it something that is substantial and more or less real, and so on. I mean, and Durian ASEAN, is a good thing. I mean, durian food is very common. We should be doing things, about ASEAN food, making it more evident, more proclaimed, yes. And we eat a lot outside, in the stalls. And if these kind of things happen in the first instance, from now, then people say, there is ASEAN, there's an ASEAN durian, let's say. Or if it happens in terms of having lanes, at airports, all major points of entry, in the queues, there's an ASEAN lane. I'm an ASEAN person, so I get, the ASEAN lane. You have an ASEAN business travel card. I'm an ASEAN business traveler, or even a foreign non-ASEAN person. I've got this card. I can go around ASEAN, and it has a premier lane for this ASEAN business travel card. So you should do these sorts of things. There are a number of these things, quite simple. We call them low-hanging fruits that can be done to make it real to people, before you get into the business and economic
more
side
detailed
of things.
structure.
I think it's really important to have a sense of belonging when it comes to ASEAN, and having ASEAN Way is also important, especially in Malaysia, because we all very well know that the awareness of ASEAN here, it's quite lower than the other compared to other countries.
But we will take one short break. When we return, we will talk about how can we increase the ASEAN awareness in this region.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Welcome back, this is Grace.
And of course, we are still with us and Tan Sri, Munir, Majid. So, Tan Sri, I have a question regarding on ASEAN awareness. Of course, we discussed earlier for you explained, like maybe we can start out with having more ASEAN presence in airports, in any other area that on the street and all that. But I guess when it comes to ASEAN awareness, what are the most important aspect that governments or corporations or whatever it is need to realize to ensure that people on the street know about Southeast Asia the correct way?
Well, sort of radio programs and stations such as yours, sort of
So
to
engaging
play a
with
role.
media.
Yeah, let them know you discuss these things out in the open. TV, television programs need to be done, not about people making speeches and people sitting on chairs listening to them, clapping, all the big shots and what have you. You need to have things about people, other people, common people, fashion leaders, actors, football players. In ASEAN, has there been anything of this done? I mean, it should be done both in English and in the different ASEAN languages. So there's a lot of things that can be done. Also in terms of the website of the ASEAN Secretariat, for example, the website very stodgy, quite boring. Again, people linking hands, speeches being made, photographs taken. But you need to have more interactive, colorful sort of website to attract the younger people. Younger people now won't spend more than a minute on the ASEAN website, the way it is designed, and therefore they can do many things at the same time. The consciousness comes if the website's interesting. How much time people go on all sorts of websites, and you give information in an interesting fashion. They know, we signed the environment agreement among ASEAN ministers. How come we still have the haze? For example, people say, no, we signed this agreement that development should not take place on the confluence of rivers exposed to the wind and everything else, the waves and so on. How come there's this development taking place? Then in different ASEAN communities, people can pressure, their politician. You signed this agreement, how can we do this sort of thing? So, the awareness comes and so it can be developed, we were talking just now about labor and so on. The awareness comes from, interacting with other people, of course. At the same time, of course, at the higher level, if you like, at a different level, I'd like to say not higher, you have the skilled labor that can move, and there are efforts to inculcate that. At the same time, you have things like products that move. There will be different ASEAN products. But in the first instance, given how far we are from this awareness that you ask about, we have to pick out certain very common or garden stuff, that will affect people and make them aware of an ASEAN thing.
And of course, with the increased middle income population, I think there's a study done that by 2030, more and more Southeast Asian will be middle class. How does AEC able to provide both infrastructure connectivity and economic liberalization? Because what we are seeing right now is still very much a very vague idea about us and economic community to the lay person. And when we talk about connectivity, I still remember personally there is such a blueprint, ASEAN connectivity blueprint, but until now it seems to just disappear, the discourse about connectivity.
Well, let's take on first what has happened, despite everything, if you like. Air travel, low-cost carriers. They are now over 50% of air traffic, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Thailand. And therefore, connectivity among people has increased, and low-cost carriers have been the agent of change in such connectivity, and it includes cargo as well. Don't forget, cargo apart from people, and therefore there has been that improvement. Of course, we have this connectivity we've been talking about, the rail thing that's going to go up to Kunming, and down, and so even the Malaysia fast train thing with Singapore has not moved. Funds, are a problem. Finance is at the base of everything you want to do, and without the financial lifeblood, things don't happen. So ASEAN has got to concentrate on how to integrate its financial systems so that financial services become available and capital markets become larger so that they can raise finance, to finance the kind of thing you talk about, infrastructure.
And private sectors are just waiting for it to happen.
Yeah.
Then they can put their toes inside it.
Yeah, but the rise of travel by air has been phenomenal, and it has risen largely in the region. Intra-regional travel has expanded beyond all expectations. But this is quite independent of the opening up.
That's
the
the
market.
interesting point in it, actually.
Business will move, and sometimes business will force opening up as well, and not wait for regulations to change. And this is particularly true, not just but particularly true, I think, of what do you call it, IT. IT will penetrate everything, and websites and so on become so important.
I mean, even in the Malaysian scene, you see a booming of young people interested in IT, building apps, becoming tech entrepreneurs. So these are interesting development, despite AEC being a very vague term, and government hasn't been respond into it full-heartedly. So
internet penetration in Southeast Asia has increased, although it's not anywhere near other countries. It's probably about 40% or so. But the mobile, the mobile devices, the telephones and so on, is 130%, which means some people have two phones and what have you. And even Myanmar, where it was so far behind until it opened up in 2011. And I remember going to Myanmar before 2011, after 2011, being frustrated with use of phones, mobile phones, access, inability to use credit cards, and then you must have crisp dollar notes, must iron them properly because they keep, they actually were physical, to that extent. And now, of course, I hear a new supermarket has opened in Myanmar which accepts Visa cards. A supermarket accepting Visa cards. So, things happen sometimes despite regulations, and people are very clever, and, they are innovative, they move as well. So we don't expect everything to be laid out for you. And then you just, walk on that red carpet, into this grand new sort of world.
Let's move on to the ASEAN Summit, and of course the ASEAN Business Summit that you will be hosting prior to the ASEAN Summit. But just a bit on the ASEAN Summit, because ASEAN Economic Community is a very, I would say, serious topic, as much as we want to talk about security and also regional threats. I quote unquote the South China Sea. But how much of the importance of pressing issues like South China Sea will somehow overwhelm other issues, especially issues related to economy, during the meeting at the ASEAN Summit?
There are some problems, no doubt, that exist with respect to the South China Sea, and they are problems which, to an extent, can be addressed because Malaysia is the chair, because Malaysia's relations with China probably is very close. So it might help. However, it depends how far Malaysia is prepared to go without sacrificing its good relations. I understand that Malaysia is quite keen to ensure that during Malaysia's chairmanship, the code of conduct, that is to govern the conduct of states in the South China Sea would materialize. And this is objective number one, and probably the most critical strategic objective for the South China Sea issues. Insofar as the settlement of the actual disputes is concerned, there are problems there, of course, complications. At the same time, one of the ASEAN member states, our dear Cambodia, has come out to say, ASEAN cannot get involved in the settlement of the disputes, which may be so. It could be, between the two countries. But ASEAN can be involved in ensuring that there is peace, even if the disputes are not settled. So, after all, China also deals with ASEAN as a group when it comes to trade and when it comes to investment. So why can't it deal with ASEAN?
So this could be the first time, if it ever happened, that Southeast Asian is dealing with giants like China in a regional pact manner rather than bilaterally. Even though China earlier on said they will only deal with the South China Sea issue bilaterally with the countries involved. Yeah,
China has a problem in its mind. Its concept of territories is not based on a secular, sort of interstate thing. It's rather a civilizational and cultural and historical, and that's where the problem arises. And so essentially, if you can have good relations with China, you can solve your problems, because China has got lines of contact with people close to their center, the emperor type idea. And so it's implicit in their thinking. And as they become a great power, this will become the modus operandi, the way they move forward. And countries adjust to great powers, they adjust, they make things. But China has to be more sensitive, to Southeast Asian needs, and particularly the need for peace. I mean, disputes may not be settled, but peace can. It took China with its land disputes that were settled. It took China how many years? Uzuri River, they had big fight in 1969 or something. It took them about 40 years, 35 years, 40 years before it was resolved. Of course, there's some disputes not resolved with India and so on. So China sees, as long as you cooperate there, have peace, have a code of conduct which ensures there is no fighting, and then you cooperate. And some of China's initiatives, like the ASEAN Infrastructure Investment Bank and so on, will help the cooperation, the economic cooperation, and then you have mutual interest in ensuring peace is sustained, so that you can grow some more, cooperate some more, and become a big, prosperous
With
region.
that, actually, I really want to know more about the ASEAN Business Summit, because one of the agenda is to talk about the award towards ASEAN companies.
Yeah, I mean, the ASEAN, what we're doing in April 24th, is to have the ASEAN Business Awards, Malaysia.
Oh, it's a
Malaysian chapter. We'll have the full-scale ASEAN Business Awards, ASEAN-wide, in November 20th and 21st. And so what we're doing here is, because last year I was very disappointed because there's no Malaysian company participated in the ASEAN Business Awards level. I'm pro-ASEAN, but I'm also very Malaysian. There's no contradiction, you can work together to achieve these things. So we want Malaysian companies to be involved, and therefore we're organizing this. We've organized it before, I believe, but we're making sure we're organizing it this year, because I want to make sure that Malaysian companies actually not only because we have so many companies that have had an ASEAN footprint that have been very successful. I can rattle them off, whoever you think they are, from the Selangor Pewters of the world to the Air Asias of the world, from the Guntings of the world to the Maybanks of the world. There's so many Malaysian companies that have expanded in ASEAN. And now they're going to get a great chance to expand further, deepen their presence in those countries. And so we want them to be competing for these ASEAN Business Awards and against other countries, other companies, and there are many of those from Singapore, from Thailand. Thailand, we don't know here. It's been expanding a lot, especially in the retail sector, in Vietnam, in Laos, in Cambodia, the CLMV countries. Thailand is pretty strong in retail, particularly. And so, all these companies will compete, to see who has done most on various measures of ASEAN presence, of course.
So this year we have a lot of Malaysian companies competing, or it's just for Malaysian?
This is for Malaysia at this stage, and those companies, obviously, we will encourage them to go into the ASEAN level stage in November, and I'm sure there'll be one or two Malaysian companies that will win. And this year we're looking at some very good companies already, which we will announce on the 24th. The Prime Minister is coming. And it's going to be a big event at a Malaysian level, but there will be ASEAN people present as well, because it is occurring at the time of the ASEAN Summit, this first summit that's taking place, the economic ministers, the leaders, and so on. And so, but wow, if you look at the November event, it's going to be massive, because it will be ASEAN plus 8 countries.
So how can companies or individuals who are interested in business join the ASEAN Business Summit?
There are two things here. ASEAN Business Awards, you apply to, for the awards, competing to apply. And for the summit, you're invited to attend, or you pay to attend, the conferences. It's going to be a big time conference. I'm trying to get some very big people, but also I think small people. who can talk about how to run their businesses successfully.
Do you have a website for people to?
Yes, there is. And the Secretary General of ASEAN Business Advisory Council, who happens to be also on the Malaysian Council, Syed Nabil is really sort of driving this.
So I'm really looking forward to the ASEAN Business Summit, especially the awards, because it's great to have Malaysian companies, being recognized on an ASEAN level. And of course, by November, it will be a much bigger event where companies from Malaysia and other Southeast Asian countries would be recognized in a way that, is truly ASEAN, I was supposed to.
Yeah.
With that, thank you very much, Tan Sri Munir Majid.
You're welcome.
Yeah.